Doesn't matter. I'm going to take it off a little bit to comment on what's going on. This is an Undead vs. Orc game, and I go Crypt Lord vs. Orc. I'll be discussing some of the advantages and the disadvantages of using the Crypt Lord, and I'm also going to go for a very massive Tier 2 push, which, at least at my level of play, has given me a pretty good win percentage versus Orc. In fact, I think I have, something like 60+% win versus Orc, and it's actually better than my other matchups, when versus Orc is actually considered to be one of the hardest matchups for Undead. Let's get this unpaused. 2-minute mark, 1x speed, 5 war on Fray's base. That's me. In 2 seconds. 2, 1, unpause. Alright. I'm going for pretty much the same fiend build that Philbot uses. It's the fast fiend build, excepting that I am going for a Crypt Lord instead of a Death Knight. Now, I'm fighting against Orc here, so it is actually okay to creep, because they don't power expand quite as well as humans do, so I'm not as concerned about that. I'm going to send my first fiend scouting. I'm just going to scout out one base with him and then pull him back. I can kind of get away with this because I actually need a little while with my Crypt Lord to sit in my base and summon up some beetles to go creeping with. You'll notice I'm getting a Nerubian Tower already. This is pretty important because the Crypt Lord is not very mobile. He doesn't have coil to heal acolytes, and as a result, he's not terribly good at dealing with harassment from Orc players. Either from a Blade Master or from a Farseer with the Spirit Wolves. You're going to need the Nerubian Tower to help you out, at least if you're anywhere near my level of skill. Maybe if you're really awesome, you could get away without it. This guy's actually not going to harass me, but it's just one of those things that I've learned to do as a cautionary measure because I've lost too many games by not building a Nerubian Tower. Okay, for this strategy, since we're going to go for a Tier 2 push, you want to pick some kind of creeping pattern that is going to give you level 3 pretty quickly on your Crypt Lord. Those level 2 beetles make your Tier 2 push extremely powerful. So you can see just the one I picked for this particular map. It's also a good idea to clear an expansion because you want to expand while you push if you have enough gold left over. Or gold and lumber, just resources in general. Here's the idea behind this strategy. By pushing very, very early in Tier 2, using a tavern hero, the Goblin Tinker, I'm going to kind of upset the pacing of the game for the Orc player, because usually Orcs have an extremely strong Tier 2 against Undead, thanks to the power of the stuff that comes out of their dual bestiaries. Both Raiders and Wyverns give you a whole lot of trouble. So I'm going to try and, I guess, kind of start screwing this guy over before he actually gets that nasty Tier 2 army rolling. I'm going to get, I think, 4, maybe 5 fiends, and yeah, I get 5 fiends, and then after that I build a couple more ghouls, because once I hit Tier 2 I'm going to want to have a little bit of extra lumber to work with, that, and 2 ghouls just doesn't quite provide enough. If you look at my opponent, he's running around creeping up his Blade Master, which is it's generally not a bad strategy. However, I found that I have the most trouble against Orc players who harass me while I'm creeping and prevent me from getting that Crypt Lord up to level 3. It ends up making my push a little bit less strong. So for the Orc players that are watching this and wondering how to counter it, in my experience, harassment is really the best way to go. I'm going to leave, if you notice, look by the tavern, I just sent a wounded beetle to sit by it, so that I can get my Tinker as soon as the Tier 2 is ready. Wounded, one of the really important things if you're going to use the Crypt Lord is to be as clever as you can with the beetles. There's a lot of uses for them. If you need to scout an expansion, if you need to hire a hero from the tavern, there's a lot of things that you can do, especially with like a wounded beetle when you're creeping, other than just, letting it die to creeps very quickly without really doing any damage. So here we go. I got the Tinker out. At Tier 2, there's about 4 things you want to do, and you do them in this order. First, you're going to want to start researching Burrow. Well, right when you hit Tier 2, you want to research Burrow, and you want to hire a Tinker, and you're going to go do a push with that, and just cram a shitload of summons down his throat. You then want to get a slaughterhouse up, and after that, you want to start an expansion. You generally have to start the expansion while you're in the middle of the push, which can take a little bit of practice to pull off. This is pretty common scenario here. I hit at this time, and he is right in the middle of building his bestiaries. I generally get a cancel on at least one of them, sometimes 2. Once I've dealt with any buildings that are building in the front of his base, I want to pick some fairly low risk targets. That one burrow was a little bit more exposed. I'm going to be fairly hesitant to go for his other burrows because they're actually pretty well protected in his base. I'm not trying to get a kill here. I'm just trying to stall him while I get closer to Tier 3, get an expansion up, and just prevent him from going berserk on me with his Tier 2 stuff. I kind of panicked there and burrowed all my fiends. That's not what you want to do. In fact, my fiend micro in this whole battle is a fantastic example of what not to do. I have burrow and he doesn't have ensnare, so I really don't have any excuse to be losing fiends at this point. I should be burrowing them before they die. As a result, you're generally going to be forced to town portal out of this battle. But you might get a couple of grunts, and the idea is that you really shouldn't lose any fiends because, as I said, you have burrow. But my timing was just a bit off on pretty much every burrow I tried to get, so I ended up losing a lot of fiends. However, I guess I lucked out a little in this game in that my opponent lost a whole ton of grunts that he really didn't need to. So normally, in a pro situation, if you could imagine more grunts being alive and more fiends being alive, that's about what it would look like at this point. Alright, I town portaled away from a Blade Master that was killing my hero. Anytime this happens, you have to be ready for him to come running into your base, wind walked, and try to pick the hero off. I was ready. I bought a healing potion, but good job me. I went and got my hero stuck, so I lost him anyway. Fortunately for me, just as his invulnerability runs out, he's not going to have quite enough mana for the wind walk, and his dies too. So, once again, it's fairly even. Had this been a game between 2 better players, both heroes would still have been alive. Take Fog of War off. Let's look at the situation here, though. He hasn't gotten his expansion yet, which typically most orc players do not. They usually throw that up once they're comfortably sitting on 4 or so raiders or wyverns or that sort of thing, and they're confident that their army can kick mine's ass. So the push did what I wanted it to. One thing I want to point out. You may have noticed that I train beetles and impale on my Crypt Lord. I don't get carapace. There's a few reasons for this. One, if you buy a lot of mana potions and stuff like that for your Crypt Lord, he's really sick to have both the beetles and impale going at the same time. The other reason is that some enterprising orc players will go for either purge or they'll get dispel, or disenchant. In which case, you want to immediately turn the beetles off, because if you're bringing beetles into the fight and he has any kind of dispelling, you're just feeding his hero's experience. And for anyone that's faced off against a high-level Tauren Chieftain or high-level Blade Master, that is really, really not something you want to do. Yes, you can use a Tome of Retraining instead, but those are expensive as hell. And the other thing is, in the ultra late game, if you get down to a situation where it's just like heroes versus heroes, you often end up being able to turn the beetles back on, and they end up being a big help. not much interesting going on in the fight here. All I'm doing is I'm just continuing to harass this guy now that I've, I don't want him to find my expansion because I don't want to have to build a whole lot of towers at it. I'd rather just keep bugging him and run away or town portal or something. That way I can bank up a lot more money. Another thing I'm going to do, I'm going to stay under 50 supply for a little while here and bank money. Because, as I said, you can do a whole lot in this strategy with the Crypt Lord with items. You end up blowing a lot of town portals because you keep harassing him like that to keep him on the ropes, and also potions of mana just make him so freaking powerful. Because you get, Impale's a great spell. It works a lot like War Stomp, and we all know how strong War Stomp is. It's imagine the same thing, only it shoots in a line instead of going around him. It doesn't catch quite as many units, but it's roughly comparable. Okay, at this point I've pretty much got the game won. He went for the Alchemist because he's a pretty good choice for Orc, and maybe the guy just, wasn't willing to let himself be out-goblined by me or something. I don't know, maybe it was a pride thing. Otherwise, I'm just going to go kill him with a bigger army in a minute. But I'll go ahead and give a recap, because there's really nothing all that much interesting left to see. That's one of the nice uses for Impale, is that you can often pick off an Orc unit that's trying to run away. Sometimes more than one. It's not a really good... I wouldn't recommend trying to get surrounds with it, because it doesn't really stun for that long. And also, trying to do a surround with fiends and beetles is pretty awkward, because, especially when you don't have the Death Knight speed aura in this strategy. So, trying to do surrounds can be pretty awkward. Just to give y'all a recap of the general idea of this strategy, what you're trying to do here is, as soon as you hit tier 2, you want to hire a tavern hero, preferably a tinker. I've actually, you can also use a pit lord and get Hal. That's pretty sick too. And just make a really nice big attack on the Orc and try and slow him down so that he doesn't get that really, really nice, powerful tier 2 army that just totally puts you on the ropes. Okay, one last thing I wanted to say about the whole bit of training beetles and Impale as opposed to beetles and Carapace is Carapace is generally a more passive spell, and the only thing it does is make it harder for him to kill your Crypt Lord, which, if you're reasonably careful, is not something that he should be trying to do anyway. Your opponent really should be trying to take out your fiends in most cases. And even if he is going after your Crypt Lord, a lot of the times you can use Impale to get yourself out of trouble. Like if he blows a scroll of speed and he's coming after you for a surround, a lot of time you can throw off an Impale and stop enough of his units that you're able to get away. And, meanwhile, your fiends that he's not attacking are going to be hammering away at his army. So, definitely something to try if you're going for the Crypt Lord. Your mileage may vary. I found it's actually, key to my success in using him is to use that ability combination as opposed to, I guess, the more traditional one ability and Carapace. Anyway, that's really all about all I have to say. I hope you've enjoyed this audio commentary or learned something from it or something to that effect. This is Fray, signing out.